Well, here we are again. Podcast number 2 for My Football Writer. And we're delighted that the regulars from last time, Steve and Connor, have been joined by Anita.
Hello.
Nice to meet you.
Hello.
More than welcome to join us tonight. So, without further ado, I think we kind of better leap in 2 feet first with the big news of the last week is Mr. Pritchard's exit. Thoughts?
I think there's been a lot of angst on social media, and probably rightly so. To be fair, whenever you sell one of your best players, you're never going to get a positive reaction from that. I think the only sort of issue with it is perhaps the fee. I think many people would like to see more. I probably would like to see more, but you know it's football, and the club are in a big financial hole, so they've got to look after themselves really, and that's always going to dictate what they can do.
Do we actually know what the fee is?
I think somewhere around 11 million is what they're saying, but depends what you read, I guess.
Plus add-ons, isn't it? I think we bought him for about 5 million. Some people saying 8 million, but we didn't have to give Spurs the extra add-ons because obviously we didn't get that promotion to the Premier League, so it then brings it back down to the 5 million.
So I'm going to do a plug for a piece which might even be live by the time this gets published, but I talk about transfer fees and exactly that point, that actually most fees are undisclosed and we don't know the terms of it, and I think, you know, a lot of fans have criticised the club saying, oh, we've sold him on the cheap, but as we said, we don't know what we bought him for, we don't know what we sold him for. I think it's share Connor's view that, you know, he is a big loss in terms of he was one of the 2 stars of the team. I guess the question is actually, can we invest the money elsewhere? If so, what positions, what sort of players we might need?
I think it has always struck me, going back to my reporting days, with no disrespect to anyone, but fans can be a bit like goldfish, can't they? You know, if you get the right result the following Saturday, when they come back round the castle, pop, 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 what was I moaning about? You know, and I think they got lucky with the result Saturday, didn't they? In terms of the feeling and the atmosphere that was around that Pritchard exit.
Yeah, I think if we'd perhaps lost on Saturday, there'd have been more angst from the fans. It was suddenly Pritchard's gone. What are we going to do without him? What are we going to do without him? Oh, we won. You know, and it was exactly that. The other thing I sort of brought into it, I thought was slightly strange that I didn't see. I may have missed it. Norwich doing their usual. We wish him good luck as he's leaving. I kind of felt there was a little bit of this. We've got him through this massive, major injury that he's had, pre-season. He's come back in. He's played a few games. He's done very well. He's paired up with Maddison well. See ya, Senora. We're off.
Yeah, it's an odd one. It was a very, very short statement, wasn't it? You can't help but wonder whether something's gone on behind the scenes in one way or another, and I mean, no one will ever know sort of the fine details of that. But yeah, as you say, I think for him personally, you can't blame him for pushing the move. I think he's 24, had a lot of injuries, and wants to play in the Premier League, and I don't think anyone can blame him for that, really.
I think when he signed, it was a transfer that was designed to bring both the club and the player himself back to the Premier League at the first opportunity, wasn't he? I mean, he obviously picked us over Brighton because he assumed that as the relegated club, that was going to be his best chance. I don't think it's any surprise that he jumped ship pretty quickly because, as I say, it's pretty clear that his stay in the Championship was going to be 1 season, 2 seasons at most, I think. So.
Yeah, he went as well to sort of, you know, all that hope about getting promotion, to then seeing his former side Brentford coming here and winning, and I think that would have undoubtedly sort of turned his head and made his mind up.
I think he was asked after the Brighton game last time, actually, when they were all bar, or they may have even been promoted that night, and he said, "Oh, any regrets?" And he was like, "No, we'll just go up next season," with a slight smirk on his face. And you know, with the best will in the world, that's looking unlikely. So I don't think anyone should be surprised that he was off.
I think the other thing, from a distance, looking at the result, the performance, and obviously the goal scorer, the fact that his mate Maddison, you know, pulled it out of the hat, pulled the result out of the hat, people would probably be assuming he might have got the hump because his mate has disappeared. But that was, again, another big bonus coming out Saturday.
As you say, I think the fans wanted to see what would a side without Pritchard look like. I mean, to be fair, he hasn't played that much this season, but the fact that Maddison was the star of the team, the fact as well that both Pritch and Maddison would naturally favour the 10 role means that arguably, again, if they can bring somebody perhaps in the wider right position, maybe there'll be a better balance to the team. But you're right, it was, whether it's lucky or not, it was a result that was really needed. I put down my pitchfork and burning torch on the back of that. I was all set to revolt right
That's
up until
it.
that.
Yeah. It's incredible what Wing can do, and obviously a signing today as well, which will help things a little bit. So I think things are. Marcus Edwards on loan. Yeah. Happened a bit quickly this afternoon, but I think that will.
I missed that as well.
It was
Too
very
busy
very
at
quickly. So I think that might help it a little bit. The fact they've got one in the door now, but we'll see.
Well, I did think that actually that we obviously Pritchard going fairly early in the transfer market did mean that they obviously gave them time to have a look around and see where they wanted to go, rather than suddenly that, on the day, last minute bids and wasting money. I think they've got to look now with what money they've got. As you said, there isn't a lot in the pot, and it's now got to be very careful with what they choose that comes in.
I think the other news that seems to be floating around, or rumour, obviously, is two older faces, potentially Russ Martin and Cameron Jerome moving on, be it to Rangers and Derby. Just one of those where their time is up, great servants, and if we get a little bit of money in off the wages, it's a decent move.
Definitely. I mean, Russ Martin, a true professional, isn't he, through and through, Norwich stalwart there. But yes, if we can get some money off the back of them, definitely. Russ Martin hasn't been in the team since, what was that fateful day at Millwall. I don't see him figuring, and getting back into the team, really. And if he wants to play football, I think he's obviously Rangers is probably his best bet. And if, say, we get money, free up his wages on the back of that, does only leave the problem of obviously one right back now. I think, doesn't it? If he goes, we've only got Ivo Pinto there.
Yeah. I think on Russ as well, he needs to get back to enjoying football and playing regularly. And at the age he is, he needs to play football. So I think Rangers is probably a good move for him. A big club in Scotland where perhaps the standard is a bit more questionable. But for him it's a great move. And for me, the interesting one is Jerome. The fact that he's looking increasingly likely that he's going to leave, and someone at 31, to get 2 million for him, I think is actually probably quite good business on Norwich's part, considering how little he's played this year, and sort of when he has played, how it doesn't look like he quite fits in. So
here's a question, and I know Rick's meant to ask the questions, but would you rather lose Jerome for 2 million or Oliveira for 8 million?
Actually, you just took the words right out of my mouth, because I was gonna be devil's advocate here and say, but is Oliveira's heart in it? What do we think?
It's funny. I don't really think either of them particularly fits into what Daniel Farke wants. So in that regard, he's got a bit of a dilemma, but he obviously favours Oliveira, and obviously there'll always be question marks over commitment and stuff with him because of his record and having so many loans and whatnot. But I'd be very surprised if the club sold him for 8 million. That's for sure.
You think he's worth more?
I think they value him higher. Yeah, considering the fact they rejected 12 million from Swansea in the summer, I think logically they'd probably want a bit more for him. But I think looking back, they might regret that one a little bit.
He looks like a player who's difficult to manage and difficult to play with. I think he's whether it's his body language or his playing style, but I think it was in the Millwall game where he nabbed the free kick off Maddison, and it was clear that he was like, I'm having this. Mm-hmm. And you just sort of think a player who's arguably out for himself. And I know, strikers do need to have that kind of selfish edge and single-minded edge, but to my mind, I wouldn't be sorry to see him go.
Yes, it's since the antics at Fulham really that he's sort of distanced himself from the supporters a little bit in how they viewed him. At one point he was being sort of lauded as the best striker in the division. So it's a really interesting one on him, and you just hope he finds some bit of form, or they cash in, either or really.
Yeah, he needs to find some form. The thing is with sort of having that arrogance or the petulance is that's fine if you can bolster that up with actually playing and scoring goals. But if you're being arrogant and you're throwing your toys out the pram and taking your shirt off and waving it at the manager, you've got to then keep on scoring and prove that you need to be in that team. At the moment, I don't think he looks like he really wants to be there.
So as we got the last fortnight of the transfer window, what do we want to see happening? What would kind of like you want to happen before now on the 31st?
Some more ins. I think they're incredibly light. I think those 18 players got off the team bus on Saturday, so it's a really light squad, and I know they like light squads, but one right back and two strikers, well probably one after this week, is not really the way you want to go in this division where there's so many games, and potentially some sort of involvement in the FA Cup if they manage to beat Chelsea. So I think Maureen's probably a right back and probably another attacking player is the two.
I was going to say exactly the same. Yeah, we've got to feel that if Russ goes, we've got to have a backup to Ivo Pinto. Striker, I've been saying that, I've been banging on, that's my drum for the last 3 seasons. I thought when Oliveira came that he was going to be was going to be that key man, target man, but I don't know whether we're just not getting those balls in or whether he just really isn't fit for the job now. But I feel we've got to have someone who can actually put the ball in the back of the net. At the end of the day, it's that final third that we seem to be failing in all the time.
That's it. I think Olivier is dropping in a lot and trying to get involved in play with Maddison and stuff, and it's just sort of condensed in the middle, which isn't really helpful.
I think it's important as well, though, that the club keep with the transformation, because we've talked about suffering on the back of 3 or 4 poor transfer windows. Well, they come around every 6 months, so the club has to use it to carry on with its transition. So that does mean moving on players such as Russell Martin, hopefully Stephen Naismith, but that constant evolution, we can't afford just to kind of drift through something. And again, in terms of what would you like, just echo what the other guys have said here, but for me it's crucial that they hold on to Maddison, because stating the obvious, he is the star of the team. But I think in terms of the goodwill from the fans, if they were to cash in now, well, it would be revolt, wouldn't it? So
it's interesting, the change, isn't it, now? Because when we did the first podcast, everyone was a bit down in the dumps. We were sitting here questioning the Webolution. Courtesy of Saturday is 2 wins off the playoff spaces. And again, I think if you go through the team individually, there are certain stars of the show now, which everyone is starting to, obviously Angus with a save on Saturday, Hanley's come in. There is a lot of room to hope suddenly.
There is, but then those who want to look at the glass being half empty will say, well, of course Angus is only here till the end of the season. We'll probably cash in on Maddison as well. Tetty, who actually I think has been the real unsung hero. I'll be honest, I never rated him that highly until he disappeared out of the team, and then you notice him. And whether it's finances, whether it's likely that we'd be able to keep him, I don't know. But again, if you want to be pessimistic, you'd say there's another one that's going to go in the summer, and it'll be another big loss.
Yeah, on Tetty, yeah, I think he's been immense this year, and I still think the club might hope that they can get something, but whether that sort of fits in with his wage demands or not, I don't know, and whether he wants to stay or fancy a new challenge. But yeah, I agree.
I think Tetty has tried to be off in the last transfer window and last season. So I think if a club comes in for him, he will have his head turned, most definitely. And I say it's one of those players that, on the back of last season, we really didn't perhaps appreciate how crucial he is. But he's come in and obviously proved, that defensively in that mid-point, we need him to go back and to shore up and help there with the defence there. He has been crucial in that role.
Being a bit of a sort of devil's advocate here, and let's talk about Jamal Lewis. Is there a feeling, do you sense, that, and it's a bit like the Murphy boys, they only need 6 months to demonstrate what they're capable of, and then someone just comes in? Do we just accept that's the way it's going to be? Because obviously, he has done very well, starting to look the part, but he's 19. How long do we think before an Arsenal, or he looks to me like a classic Arsenal player, comes in, and we just have to accept, right? Well, that's it. Job done.
Well, I was sort of hoping a little bit he might learn off the back of Jacob Murphy, because I don't think Jacob Murphy's move's done him particularly well. Perhaps that's the way we, as a club, can sell that, or his advisors can put that through, that you need another full season at least to build your confidence and to have that play time in the Championship to get you ready and serve in the Premier League.
That's it. I think his position as well might go in Norwich's favour. I think no one sort of recognises left backs in the same way they do sort of a winger, so maybe he'll be a little bit more sort of underrated and under wraps for Norwich, and they can get a good season or 2 out of him.
I think it'd be interesting to ask that question of Southampton and their fans, because they've basically had a conveyor belt of their promising talent sold on regularly, and in fact that's effectively their model, isn't it? That they expect this conveyor belt of talent to come through. Whether that's something that we can emulate, I don't know. By all accounts, the academy needs work, needs development, and has obviously had a bit of a restructure there. But it's the nature of football, isn't it? There's always someone bigger and better with more money. So actually, if you've got top talent, you can expect that eventually they'll move on. Even Barcelona lost Neymar because there's someone again who can offer more. So there does come a point where you have to accept natural hierarchy and that some of your better players will move on, I guess.
And that sort of feeds in with Maddison as well, sort of where we are at the moment. Although the way he is, you sort of hope that he appreciates the journey a little bit more. I think he stayed at Coventry perhaps a lot longer than he should have, and he also signed for Norwich over some of the big guys. So you would hope that he has that level head and will perhaps realise that time is on his side. At 19 or at 21. They've got time to develop, and they need to develop, because if not, then they're not going to play for the top sides.
And again, it goes down to his character and personality. He may very well enjoy being the star man of a team in the Championship and being idolised as opposed to a bench warmer somewhere else.
So let's just look at the league position. Are people dreaming a dream?
Yes. I don't think we're going to go into them playoff spots. I've said it right from the beginning of the season. I think I put on one of the predicting tables that I thought we'd finish at 12th. We're pretty much 13th. Mm-hmm. And I said I'd be quite happy if we finished there with what I thought was going on with the club, the transitional period, and I thought that there would be, a lot of sales, a lot of outs going with the high salaries. They pushed to try and do it last season. I knew it had to happen this season. Otherwise we weren't going to survive as a club. And I thought that, realistically, 12th, 13th would have been about the right spot for us to finish this season. And then, really hope that we would then have gelled as a team, have got a squad that we found is going to work for us, and hopefully push on for it next season.
I think there's been so much change, as you mentioned there, that to expect sort of automatic promotion or running off with the league was unrealistic. But I think this side is a streaky side. I think it's a side that runs on confidence. They'll go through really good runs, go through really bad runs, as they've sort of illustrated earlier on. They'll beat some good teams, lose to some not so good teams, and I think mid-table's probably about right, sadly.
It is. We've not shown the level of consistency we'd need to make a proper push for the playoffs. And I think the other point is that to actually make up ground on the top six, you've got to you're trying to catch up teams who are averaging 1.5, 2 points a game. So it's not like kind of clawing your way away from the bottom. The interesting thing for me is, assuming that this is a season of transition and that we finish kind of mid-table, can we do a Huddersfield and actually kick on next year, or arguably like a Bristol City, who were pretty close to sacking Lee Johnson last season, and now there they are in the playoff places. So that for me, when you say dream the dream is that next season that everything falls into place, and that actually we've got a side that is settled, stabled, and actually capable of genuinely challenging for promotion. But
the other question, again, just throw it out there, but when you look at the players that they have brought in since the summer, and are you starting? We're going through some Triborn, and obviously Hanley. There's been some big hits, haven't there?
I think you mentioned Tribal. For me, he's the actual gem out of all the activity. Partly because when he came in, and I hold my hands up, he was just another German. In fact, he almost went unnoticed because hadn't heard of him before, didn't really know much about him, and when he came in, you're suddenly actually there's a player here. I think what's interesting is that our record is hit and miss whether we've spent money or not. We've spent big and failed miserably. We got on the cheap and failed miserably. But actually, spending big doesn't guarantee success, and I'm sure that's the same for every club. So I'm sure again, Farke and Webber have got good knowledge of the European leagues. That's the market they know well, and I wouldn't be surprised and I wouldn't be disappointed if they go looking again for that sort of player.
Yeah, I think Tom Tribal epitomises what they're trying to do in terms of recruitment. Get these players in on low wages who maybe they're taking a bit of a risk on, because if you're taking a risk on those sort of players, it's less costly than taking a risk on someone like Stephen Naismith. I think you're spot on. I think they will look abroad again, just because I think the inflation in the English market is just too much at the moment, and when you can sign sort of 2 or 3 German players for the cost of 1 English player, I think logically that makes sense. And sort of where Norwich are, they can't really afford to sign players for millions and millions of pounds. So yeah, for me, I agree with Steve. I think it's going to be your German leagues and obscure players that we've never heard of before. But in a way, I quite like that.
Yeah, we've got the lower leagues as well. I mean, we've obviously brought in Sean Raggett, from was it Lincoln City, we're going to have to look there, aren't we, and hope we find another Grant Holt or along those lines. But yeah, we haven't got the money to fight with the big boys. We haven't even really got the money to fight with other teams in the Championship. So as you said, we're going to have to look further afield and hopefully pick up a gem or two, along the way. Chris Zimmerman, another one that I thought has done quite well in transferring into the league. It must be a big difference from him. I mean, he's literally come from quite an obscure team, I think, in the Bundesliga, and I think he's done very well to transition across.
Yeah, he's been excellent.
And of course the Super Mario Vrancic, who I certainly didn't slag off last time on the podcast and said I don't know what he's doing in the team, because as we all saw on Saturday, he's capable of worldy passes and bossing the game. So yeah, I've always been a big fan, as you know.
It doesn't actually make for great radio or indeed great podcast, but we're actually sat here and there's a framed picture of Delia Smith looking over us. The owners have taken flack recently. It's clearly not an easy one to resolve. Do you think Brand Delia is starting to get a little tired?
Yes, I think so. Rightly or wrongly, she's getting a lot of flack for stuff that maybe isn't her responsibility, but ultimately she's sort of overseeing a lot of rubbish and a lot of good stuff as well in her time. But I think people are perhaps getting frustrated with seeing Barnsleys and Wolves with big owners and trying to spend money, and I think that's incredibly sort of frustrating for supporters. And there's also sort of an aspect of you which is quite jealous of it, and I wonder if that's sort of part of it. I'm not sure people are completely sold on the self-funding model, but she's here and you can't deny what she's done for the club, and I think she will. She'll have to move on eventually, but I can't see it sort of in recent times.
I'm just thinking, well, how old are you? 17. So you've known nothing but Delia.
Yeah, that's it. So and I've it's a weird one, because as you say, I've never seen anything but Delia, and then part of me sort of would feel a bit strange not seeing her. So maybe it's some sort of subliminal connection I have to her, but I don't know. I just think you have to be really, really cautious with this sort of thing.
Were you out there on the streets when the horses hooves clattering down Carrow Road with the old man Chase?
Who knows? I can't remember that. I can't even remember yesterday, truth be told, on that. I remember the Chase era. And what was interesting though was I saw a comment the other day about how, to sell a player like Pritchard, well, that's nothing new. We sold all manner of big names and our star players in the past. And what was interesting is that Robert Chase used to get absolute pelters for that. So when we sold Bellamy, when we sold Chris Sutton, when we sold Kevin Drinkle, Robert Fleck, all these players who, and it tended to be a lot of angst and anger thrown at Chase. And this time round, I noticed quite a lot towards Webber. And whether that's the difference in terms of we're not really clear who's the decision maker, is it the chief exec, the manager, is it the sporting director, all of these sorts of things, I don't know. But picking up on Connor's point about the self-funding model, I think the issue that people have with Delia, or seem to have with Delia, is that we know that with the self-funding model it will necessitate moving on our best talent all the time. And I think the fact that there does appear to be investment out there, you can't just sit there and go, oh, well, no one's going to be interested in Norwich, small championship club, because people are interested in other small championship clubs. So I think they see her now as a bit of a blocker.
I'm not really sure. I mean, it's been rumoured that in the past that we've had people sort of come knocking at the door and it hasn't worked out for whatever reasons. But I do think, though it's beautiful to live in this part of Norfolk and we all love the fact that we're sat here and we're hidden away in this little corner, it also can go against us. And I don't feel that there's perhaps a queue at the door as there would be at other clubs. We're accessible to major motorways, and that does make them a little bit more attractive, unfortunately. Yes, I'd love investment. I'm not necessarily saying I want Delia running out the door, but I do think we do need investment, and where that's going to come from, I'm not really sure. But they're not actively looking for it. That is the worry, is the fact they're not actively looking, is the fact they are expecting someone to walk down the A11 and knock on Carrow's door.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm sort of in a position of not being sort of for or against. I'm sort of okay either way, but I think this club, sort of over the last few years in particular, has been accused of looking at things as sort of short term, and I think a change of ownership is quite short term, and I think there are more pressing issues to address the academy. The fact we've got so many players on unbelievable wages still here, and that for me needs addressing before any sort of ownership debate.
I think when I look back on my time on the Evening News, I remember that end of Chase era, and I remember going to have a meeting in Hotel Nelson with this businessman down from Manchester, and it was so ridiculously hush and this, that, and the other. And then it was, I think Google was just about there. But anyway, you did a bit of ring round, and you discovered that the fellow was up in Manchester Crown Court with a serious fraud office.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And you're thinking there, and then there's Mike Cambridge. He was floating around. I don't know whether he's still with us, but there's all sorts of chances out there, and you have to be hugely careful as to who you leap in bed with.
I think you're absolutely right, but the argument about whether to invest or to get new owners or not goes round and round in circles, because at the end of the day, everyone can pick the examples that suit their narrative. So for every Portsmouth, there's a Bournemouth or whoever, and it's like you can cite the examples which work one way or another. I mean, I think as fans, maybe I'm alone here, but I don't care who owns the club as long as the club is successful. And it goes back to your goldfish point. It's like when we win a few games, I love Delia, love the club. When we lose a few games, I'm like, she's hampering us and she's holding us back. I mean, I think we were rumoured to be interested or getting the interest of some Italian guy who was then investigated for mafia links. And at the time, I was like, I've got no issue with that. If the opposition disappears before the night of the game, I don't care as long as we win. And I think, at the end of the day, it is a result. Our views of how the team's performing generally outside of the game is driven by where we are in the league, the results we're getting.
That's spot on, absolutely spot on. I think in the Premier League, I don't remember too many people, not to the same degree now, chanting for Delia's head. And I think if you're winning games and everything's hunky dory, I don't think they are to an extent. So yeah, I think it is a case of football fans are quite fickle. They're quite fickle. A player has 5 bad games, they should be out of the team, and someone, take Yannick Wildschut, should be in the side and is the saviour. So I think it's always been that way, and it probably always will be that way.
It's interesting also, I was at Burton game, and obviously Delia came in and mingled with the fans, and I did wonder, because I'd been to the Burton away game previously and she'd done the same there, and I did think, would she have the gall to do it? Would she come in and and speak with the fans? She did. They were all there. The board was there. Everyone was there. She was quite open. She was there to talk to. There's not many owners of a football club that does that.
Right, one final question before we wrap up. I know we're mid-season. Who would your player of the season be right now?
Yeah, I was going to say it's got James Maddison.
Yeah, and then Tom Tribal came into my head, and
then
I'm sort of waiting up a little bit more.
Gunn,
And Angus Gunn, yeah. So I think probably Gunn, Tribal, Maddison, your top 3. One. I'll go Maddison. Just because I don't think he'll be in next season. So yeah, I'll go Maddison.
I'll play devil's advocate, then I'm going to go Angus Gunn. It's not very often a goalkeeper can get that accolade, so I'm going to go for that one.
I'm obviously going to go for Mario Vrancic. I think his range of passing is exceptional. I'm not going to say Maddison, just in case anyone's listening and they go, he's good, is he? And then they start looking at YouTube clips. But, I mean, Madders has been standout, hasn't he? And I think beyond him, Tommy Tribal, find of the season, so...
Excellent. I think we're going to wrap it up there. So thank you all very much indeed. Been another good one, and we'll do another one 6-7 weeks down the line. Okay.